Thank you for joining us. Concern for the environment should be a priority for everyone, and part of this is understanding molecular mechanisms and how living things respond to environmental contaminants. To tell us more about this, we have Dr. Sabo Attwood, an associate professor and chair of the University of Florida's Department of Environmental and Global Health. We'll have more about this right after these messages.
Life Extension Foundation was established in 1977 and is now the world's largest consumer-based anti-aging organization. Life-saving achievements taken for granted today were pioneered by Life Extension Foundation decades ago. Life Extension is currently funding $10 million a year in research on significantly extending a healthy human lifespan. Diseases that once plagued humanity have largely been eradicated by scientific innovation. 3 leading causes of death in 1900 are no longer leading killers today. Smallpox killed millions before it was eliminated in 1979. Life Extension funds research to fight biological aging so that it also will become a relic of the past. To learn more, log on to lifeextensionfoundation.org.
When I was young, it seemed that life was so wonderful, a miracle. Oh, it was beautiful, magical. And then they showed me a world where I could be so dependable. Oh, intellectual, cynical.
Find magic again. Sprout by HP. With Intel RealSense technology inside, now you can bend the rules of creativity outside.
With us now is Dr. Sabo Attwood and Jonathan, a student right here at UF. It's a pleasure to have you here with us on the show.
Thanks for the invite.
This is such an interesting opportunity because you are head of a department in an area that is so critically important in the big picture of our world, that of environmental studies and so forth. Share with our audience what exactly you're focusing on at this present time.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Yes, so we're a fairly new department at University of Florida. We've been around since 2009. And we're environmental and global health. And we focus on several really vital issues that are important to our world, and that is emerging infectious diseases, emerging contaminants, and also global health. So our faculty travel the world in efforts to bring a clean and fruitful environment to the people of the world.
It's horrific how so much of humanity plays the fiddle while Rome burns. And there are many young people who are more concerned luckily than maybe previous generations. And one of them is Jonathan right here, who is concerned with these things. I actually used the term, you told me you felt despair over things that are going on. Why did you actually say that?
So you often hear about how desperate the situation is with regards to the environment and how we must be taking like critical action immediately. But it feels as though we aren't doing enough. So I mean, what can the average person do to help the environment?
Sure. Well, I'd like to say to you that maybe despair is not such a, we can think of an easier term to use, because I think if you look over history, we've made tremendous improvements in environmental health in the world. We've stopped spread of disease. Places in the world are a lot cleaner than they used to be. But I think we need to start with education. And not only educating students in hard environmental science, but also reaching out to communities and places around the world and provide education through that means as well. So, but I think we're doing great things, and maybe some of the thought process maybe needs to shift a little bit. And that's one thing we're actually doing at the University of Florida here in Environmental and Global Health. We have created some new programs termed One Health degrees. We have a master's degree and a doctoral degree in One Health. And this is a new concept that's been adopted by several agencies around the world, including CDC and WHO. And the concept of this is more of a systems thinking approach to environmental problems. So if you consider an epidemic, for example, you have epidemiologists come and participate in that, but they should also be thinking about bringing in other disciplines, economists, toxicologists, veterinarians. And so our programs are now sort of paradigm shifting in that students come in and they sort of get more of a systems sort of approach education to complex problems, and I think that's important.
Okay, that makes sense. How do we reach people about, you know, how important the environment is, who seem to think that the human impact on the environment is not really the deciding factor in climate change?
Well, I think there has to be an approach that involves, you know, really getting down in with the community, and that's easier said than done sometimes. You know, just basing your opinion on hard science is difficult because not everybody is a scientist, right? And so we have several faculty that are really resilient in working with communities, and this has sort of been a new area for us as well. But for example, we have a faculty member, Dr. Andrew Kane, who is involved in a new worker health ag center, Southeastern Center here at UF, which is also directed by Glenn Morris, the director of the Emerging Pathogens Institute. And their focus is on fishery communities here in Florida. And so they are doing great science with the communities to make sure that they're safe doing their job. And so people that go out into the ocean environment and do collections of or harvesting of fish food, which is so vital as a food source, and a high protein food source for us and the world, they have one of the most dangerous occupations. And so Dr. Kane and his team is actually down on the ground with these folks, developing relationships so they can see the importance of what they're doing and how that sort of work really sort of helps them maybe see the importance of things that we're doing in the environment and how that impacts their economy, their jobs, and that those are the things that what I think make America great.
I think that's very important. It's somewhat related to fishing. I recently read that that animal agriculture, you know, the farming of, you know, chickens and cows and that kind of thing, is one of the greatest human causes of climate change. And recently there have been developments in lab-grown meat. Do you think that's lab-grown meat would be like a viable alternative to factory farming of animals?
I'm not sure I know what the term lab-grown meat refers to per se, but I think if you're talking about something analogous to like high-density aquaculture or, you know, CAFOS operations where they're sort of, you know, putting a lot of animals in close containment and high density, you know, I think there are some concerns that surround that, you know, with output and what sort of output gets into the environment and how really healthy those animals are. So, but I can speak more to aquaculture because I know more about that. I think there's probably a need for it, you know, as we see populations expand and grow, and you know, it's projected to grow by the billions over the next couple decades. And we need food to feed people, and so that's a real problem in other places around the world. It's a problem in the U.S. domestically, but certainly in other places. You know, aquaculture provides very high-level protein food source, and so, you know, I think we need to push for those types of industries. They would provide jobs as well, but I think we need to do it safely, just like everything else, and make sure that we're not having negative impacts on the environment as a result.
A concern I have is that in the energy industry, there are intelligent solutions available. I hear things about thorium reactors rather than regular nuclear reactors as solutions, and as we sit here today, I'm shocked to say that the Fukushima disaster in Japan, the reactor there, things are not improving, they're getting worse on a daily basis, reflecting on humanity's ability with technology and science to address and resolve so many issues of concern. Why are we not implementing more solutions internationally with regard to environment and other concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges is that you have, different regulation in different parts of the world. And so, pollution doesn't just stay in one place necessarily. And so, the example that you pointed to is a prime one, because you have, pollution released in one place in the world and it actually affects other parts of the world. And so, I definitely think there needs to be a movement where, everybody's on the same page, but you can imagine how difficult that is. Different countries have different priorities, whether that's economics or, jobs or pollution or what have you. And so, but I think that's something that should be done, and I think it's something that people should really think thoughtfully about.
Jonathan, what are your thoughts on that?
I definitely think that we have to be more aware of the risks of certain technology. Like, we've seen many disasters from nuclear reactors. We have to be aware of, the risks of using different technology and trying to mitigate those risks.
Well, interesting you say that, Jonathan, about mitigating. And, one of the areas that we're pretty passionate about in environmental health is trying to study, emerging contaminants that we don't know a lot about, that are being used in consumer and industrial products today, but they aren't regulated. So there's a new class of contaminants called nanomaterials, for example, that are just very, very small particles. That's what they stand for. And they're being used in cosmetics and sunscreens and fuel cells and all sorts of things. And they're not regulated by any governmental agency at this point. And so as a field of toxicologists, that we are trying to be proactive and try to understand if there's any possibility for exposure and health effects that come from a polluted environment. And so we're trying to answer those questions before 20 or 30 years down the road, people are sick with some sort of injury as a result.
You mentioned nanoparticles, and that brings to mind asbestos. Asbestos has been used in building materials for years and is one of the most toxic substances. Please share a little bit more with our audience as to what all of that means.
Sure, and I've actually been engaged in asbestos research in the past. And so, when you know that something is harmful from a health standpoint, such as asbestos, and then you have particles that may share some similarity to that creates a concern. And that's one of the reasons with these small particles, if people inhale them, that there is a concern that there could be the potential for diseases that are asbestos-like or like associated with inhalation of small particles like PM2.5 that's present in air pollution or other small particulates like silica-based particles. I think we always have to be a little bit careful, though, about using the terms asbestos in the same context of nanoparticles, and that's especially true for communication with the public because that sort of creates a negative connotation right off the bat. And so that's something that we're trying to be very careful about, is how we communicate what we're finding to the public. And I think as of now, the jury's still out. There's a concern for health and especially lung disease associated with exposure to these small particles, but whether it produces lung disease like exposure to other particles that we know about, we're not really sure.
I'd like to ask you about the work that UF is doing with regard to infectious disease like the Zika virus and other similar diseases.
Yeah, several of our faculty are highly engaged in research that surrounds Zika, dengue, chikungunya, and several other infectious diseases. And we're also part of a big center funded by the CDC that UF is involved with several other universities in Florida, trying to stop, and the focus of that is trying to stop the spread of these type of vector-borne diseases. And so if you think about Florida, it's sort of a gateway or entry point for lots of these diseases into the United States. And so they're really focused on trying to understand health effects like is microcephaly that we now know is affiliated or associated with Zika virus exposure in pregnant mothers. So some of the basic biology of that, but also very interested in trying to understand stopping or mitigating the spread of disease through development of effective vaccines and things of that nature.
Right.
I was thinking about education in general and how people are excessively preoccupied with entertainment and the idiot box, biting the hand that feeds me television. But there are some redeeming features, like Neil deGrasse Tyson did this TV series, Cosmos, a remake of the previous one, and superb, absolutely exquisite in my opinion, and essential viewing for any student anywhere in the world. What is being done at UF to use the power of television to more effectively reach into people's minds and hearts with materials and subject matter that is essential as yours?
Yeah, I think to reach folks nowadays, and especially the millennials, you know, you need different approaches than what we've been doing in the past. And so, you know, everybody's on their electronic device, and so you can certainly do TV outreach for sure. But I think there's other mechanisms as well that feed into people's electronic devices that are, you know, shorter segments, in our case, about the environment that we're actually working on, that, you know, provide sort of a gateway for them to connect with information related to the environment. I think times are changing a little bit, and we do that now with distance education. So, you know, a lot of us have programs that are fully online, and this allows us to reach far-reaching places of the world. So we have students that are engaged in our programs, you know, that are in Iran and Pakistan and Africa and all over the world. And they get a good education that way, which they otherwise wouldn't be able to because they can't necessarily come here to the United States.
Please tell us about the One Health project.
Sure. So One Health is a concept that really came out of the area of zoonosis and infectious disease. And the basic concept is that you have they always sort of display this in a triad, like a Venn diagram of 3 circles, which represents human health, animal health, and environmental health. And so in the middle of that triad is what you have your wicked or complex problems of society. And so the idea is that you have to sort of focus on all of these 3 areas together to be able to solve some kind of problem effectively. And so that's where I was talking about earlier, the sort of involvement of multidisciplines. And so what's sort of a little bit different compared to just interdisciplinary science, where you're trying to do projects across, say, toxicology and infectious disease, these programs are developed in such a way that it allows someone like me, a student being trained in toxicology, or my students that are trained in toxicology, to just have an awareness that there's other disciplines around that would likely be very helpful if they're called onto scene to solve some sort of complex problem, a spill, an epidemic, you know, something like that, that they think about calling an epidemiologist, an infectious disease person, but also people that are a little bit normally outside of the box, scientific communication people, economists, those sort of things. And so the training that the students get in our One Health programs they focus on something, so they become an expert in one subject like infectious disease, but then they get a broad perspective of some of these other disciplines. And so what it implants in their mind is the thought of the systems approach when they're going out into the world and trying to deal with complex environmental problems.
Could you talk about the breadth of the environmental science degree and what UF students have done with the degree to advance research in the field?
Sure. Yeah, we have several tiered degrees in our department, and we have 2 master's levels degrees in MPH and an MHS in Master of Health Science in One Health, and then we have a doctoral degree that has 2 tracks, either environmental health or One Health. And so we're an interesting department, and we're quite unique, and I think that gives us a strength that a lot of other departments don't have in classic environmental health, and that is we cover areas of infectious disease, toxicology, and also very applied global health. And so depending on who they're working with in the department, the students gain skills in everything from basic biology, so these are students that are working in wet laboratories doing molecular-based biology or toxicology or infectious disease, And that spans all the way to folks that are doing very, very applied public and global health. So we have faculty that are working in the global south and working on behavioral nutrition in Africa and other places. And then we have folks that are developing technology that help people get better treatment out in rural places using their cell phones as a mechanism. So the breadth of training is very diverse, and our graduates go on to get employment or jobs in several different sectors. Some of those are government, like the EPA, or they become EIS officers at the CDC. Other folks go and work with the Department of Health, the Department of Environmental Protection. Some go into academia, and lots go also into industry, and they go work for, you know, especially in the toxicology world, pharmaceutical industries or chemical companies or things of that nature. So pretty diverse group we have.
Yeah, certainly. It seems like a very diverse program.
It is, and I think it's sort of a strength, especially because we are really sort of engaged now in this One Health. It really gives on-the-ground exposure to lots of disciplines all in one place.
Right. It's really good.
Protecting the environment and coming up with intelligent solutions and implementing them is a cause that is greater, I would say, than ever. I want to thank you so very much for being
Thank you so
with
much.
us here
It's a
today.
pleasure being
Thank
here.
you. And thank you, Jonathan, as well.
You.
Thank you.
The biblical River Jordan, a rare freshwater resource in the Middle East. It forms the border between Israel on the West Bank and Jordan. At this bend, about 6 miles from Jericho, it's believed John the Baptist baptized Jesus of Nazareth.
I baptize you.
These pilgrims hail from Ballston Spa, upstate New York.
How is the water?
It's cold.
And shallow, too.
In the 60s, the water level of the Jordan River was actually where we're standing now.
In wintertime, it was this high.
Gidon Bromberg is Israel Director of EcoPeace Middle East, an environmental group.
Pilgrims, when they came here, were under threat of being drowned by the strength, by the power of this river. Today, a mouse wheel will hardly turn with what's left of this river.
For decades, Israel and its neighbors diverted the Jordan's flow to supply drinking water and water for crops. While the river is down 95% from its historical flow, there's hope that someday it could return to its former glory. That's because Israel today has more water than it needs. It's gone from drought to water surplus in just a few years. Impressive anywhere, but especially in the arid Middle East, one of the driest regions in the world. Through a combination of recycling, conservation, and most recently, desalination technology, removing salt from salt water, Israel not only has plenty to drink, but potentially plenty to share. And that could be good news for easing tensions in a region where water is often the source of conflict. Israel is already easily the world leader in water reuse, far outpacing the rest of the world, including the United States. Across Israel, plants like this one in the desert town of Rahat treat wastewater instead of letting it go to waste. So-called grey water from the kitchen and bathroom, as well as black water from sewage, is filtered, cleaned and reused for irrigation.
It's a perfect little recycling ecosystem. The waste from the people of Rahat over there is treated here and then used to irrigate the fields nearby.
But the real leap forward has been in desalination technology, vastly improving Israel's ability to turn salty water into fresh drinking water. In 10 years, Israel has built 5 desalination plants along its Mediterranean coast. In Ashkelon, Ashdod, Sorek, Palmachim and Hadera. Each cost around $400 million. They're privately owned and sell their water to the government, which sells it on to the people. Together, the desalination plants provide up to 50% of Israel's drinking water.
The Israelis have achieved something extraordinary. 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was all about save water and bath together. And now they've got more water than they need.
It is remarkable. It's been a slow process. So Israel's leadership in treating sewage has taken place over the last 15 years. The breakthrough has been in the development of membrane technology for desalination, because that breakthrough in technology dramatically reduced the cost of desalinating seawater.
From about $1 a cubic meter to about 40 cents.
Exactly, to less than half the cost
10 miles south of Tel Aviv, the Sorek plant, open only 18 months, calls itself the world's biggest seawater desalination plant of its kind. It can produce more than 600,000 cubic meters of drinking water a day, enough for 1.5 million people, almost a fifth of Israel's population. Avshalom Felber is CEO of IDE Technologies, which built the Sorek desalination plant.
This is where the water from the Mediterranean enters the plant.
Exactly. Under here, there's a deep pit going about 70 meters down, where all this water is collected, and it comes by gravity from the sea, just under sea level. The pumps here lift it from here, from this pit, to the pre-treatment area.
From pre-treatment, the water moves through a series of smaller and smaller screens and filters. Then the water's piped into this complex of buildings, where a fine membrane is used to remove the last bits of salt and other minerals.
There's about 2,000 pressure vessels here that shoot water down through the membranes.
But the biggest problem is the mindset has been all or nothing. For the last 20 years, the negotiations in the peace process have been either we agree on all 5 final status issues of the peace process, water being one of them, but Jerusalem, settlements, borders, or we agree on nothing. And therefore for 20 years we've agreed on nothing.
Water's often caught up in wider political debates. For example, we visited the planned West Bank Palestinian city of Rawabi, where there was a delay for 1.5 years over disputes about water. The Israeli Prime Minister cut through the red tape this year and promised to open the tap this spring. Still, in the past, the Israelis have used water to prevent conflict. Today, Israel's challenge is to do all it can to secure its water independence and to use that independence to build bridges with its neighbors.
The history of Israel lives in all of us. Come find the Israel in you.
Human age reversal. We may be there already. Human studies are now ready to begin to confirm meaningful reversal of pathological aging processes. These clinical trials aim to alter older humans so that they function as much younger individuals. Even modest success will result in a paradigm shift that will impart enormous societal benefits, such as sparing Medicare from insolvency. Life extension is not standing idle while 5,000 Americans die each day from age-related illnesses. Joining us are physician scientists who want to hurry up these technologies to keep people from aging to death. While life extension is pushing these projects forward, we need financial help to ensure these studies are carried through to fruition. You can support this research by making a tax-deductible donation to Life Extension Society. All donations will be used to fund age reversal research. Join us on this essential mission.
This brings us to the end of our special show from On Location at UF in Gainesville, Florida. Thank you for being with us.